How's it going, everybody? I hope you're all doing well. Well, in this episode, I thought I'd try something a little bit different. I thought I'd explore the question, what's better, Star Wars or Star Trek? And I don't mean as films or as art. I mean something like, which one is philosophically more interesting, and ultimately, which of the two worlds would I rather live in? Okay, so let me just jump right into it. And let's begin with Star Trek. So to begin with, I'd say that Star Trek is ultimately about progress. It asks what kind of future is possible for humanity if we become wiser and more thoughtful. More to the point, maybe, Star Trek is essentially constructed on the foundation of Enlightenment values. That is, it takes as its highest values science and reason and diplomacy and moral advancement. In this way, it strives for an increasingly utopian future. That's to say, it believes that it's possible for human beings to overcome things like greed and inequality and war. And in many ways, the Federation is partly already there. I mean, for one thing, scarcity no longer exists. And that's because money has become obsolete, while knowledge has been elevated to the highest good. Now, Star Wars, well, that's totally different. I think it's safe to say that that universe draws not from Enlightenment values and progress, but from ancient religious and mythological and heroic traditions. And that's important because, first of all, the focus is more on individualism rather than the collective. That's to say, Star Wars is about the chosen individual, the exceptional hero with great power and with heavy burden. Here, the fate of the galaxies rests on certain special people. So, salvation is individual. One person is destined to change everything for everybody. So, while Star Wars is fundamentally individualistic like this, Star Trek is not. Star Trek has a collectivist and communal or societal vision of human flourishing. While Star Wars is about the great individual, Star Trek is really about the great society, one that we all work on together to achieve. And their view on progress is different too. I mean, I said earlier that Star Trek draws on the Enlightenment theme of linear progress, that through the application of reason and knowledge, we can and most certainly will build a just and a thriving future. Well, I'd say that this is simply not the view in the Star Wars universe. No, because it draws from ancient mythology, the outlook here is not linear, but much more cyclical and tragic. In other words, events don't ultimately improve. No, they repeat. Empires rise and rebellions return, and this happens over and over again. There is no ultimate historical achievement, just power struggles caught in a loop. This is a kind of eternal recurrence or struggle, something actually that's rooted in the mythic framework of Zoroastrianism, which George Lucas weaved into the very fabric of the Star Wars worldview. Anyway, the larger point is that while for Star Trek, progress towards a different future is the highest and very real goal, it seems like the highest goal available in the Star Wars universe is simply doing what one can to preserve a kind of temporary balance. Okay, well, speaking of Zoroastrianism, I'd say that another important difference between them has to do with how they view ethics. You see, like Zoroastrianism, Star Wars often presents ethics as binary, as black and white, or as the dark side and the light side, as straightforward good and evil. In other words, it feels like in Star Wars, this binary division is embedded in the very structure of the universe with little nuance in between. Like there's a cosmic moral scoreboard. Every important choice someone makes seems to exactly map onto this cosmic binary. Okay, but Star Trek, well, that's totally different, I'd say. there's just way more ethical nuance at work there. There's more moral ambiguity or less moral clarity. That's to say, Star Trek often presents ethical dilemmas with no obviously clear solution. Like, what counts as a person? Or should we violate the Prime Directive? Maybe another way of coming at this is that in Star Wars, it feels like it's all about which of the two sides you're on in a mythic war. But in Star Trek, well, the focus there often seems to be about what it is you should do in those all too common gray areas of life, where answers are hard to find but important to pursue. Okay, well, the last important difference I wanted to mention, which I alluded to at the outset, is their respective views on science and reason. So I think it's pretty clear that Star Trek, being deeply rooted in Enlightenment values, makes rationality and the scientific method the most important of commitments. So in the Star Trek world, there really is no magic. What I mean is that anything that seems to be miraculous is really either explained or in principle explainable. If there is something unknown, it's not viewed as mystical. No, it's just viewed as something not yet understood. Maybe another way of saying this is that unknown objects or entities, like for example the infamous Q, they aren't treated with awe and supplicated to. Rather, they're analyzed and even challenged or interrogated. Well, we seem to get a completely different picture in Star Wars. I mean, I don't think it's an overstatement to say that there, mysticism and faith and the Force dominate the universe. Now, sure, science and technology exist, obviously, but they do play a secondary role. Here, faith and feelings are much more important. The Force, for example, can't be known or analyzed, right? It can only be felt, and it must be yielded to and obeyed. And when it comes to the application of science and technology, well, the overall sense there is that this is coupled more to evil than it is to good. I mean, the Empire builds massive technologies like the Death Star, while the hero rebels, well, that's not how they get things done. No, for them, it's all about simple faith and conscience and luck. Anyway, so, if I had to choose to be transported to either the Star Trek or Star Wars universe, I would have to say that I wouldn't hesitate for 1 second. No, I'll take peace over war. I'll take post-scarcity over a black market. I'll take reason and education over mysticism and confabulation. I'll take human agency over destiny. I'll take the collective and cooperation over the individual. I'll take people doing their part and thinking for themselves over hero worship. I'll take secular morality and diplomacy over tribalism. I'll choose a philosophy of hope over a mythology of struggle. I'll choose a place that no one's been before over one that we've been in far too many times. I'll take Star Trek over Star Wars. Bye for now.